It's good to be here. And appreciate those here and those online, allowing all the unfoldment and the connection to the whole world that's going through different things right now. In Europe today, there's a big, all over Europe, there are large demonstrations planned in most of the cities, like about 40 or 50 cities today. So it's already probably in process, and a lot of it is to do with the austerity programs and things, just with the injustice of society, the injustice of life over there, the injustice of all the things that don't allow for easy living of life. Mankind has been in process for thousands of years of not allowing a proper balance of life, balance between the substance of the earth, and balance between people. And everything is seeking to rebalance itself, come into a new pattern of harmony. We're, of course, charged with being in place of balance ourselves as individuals, because the place of balance for the world starts with the individual. Being at balance, being centered, being in the place where divine cause can meet human action. There is things and there are things to be done. And those things have to be done in a place where they're most effective, in union with life, in union with the creative spirit. When they're destructive patterns on their own, then they just turn out destructive. The world, in a sense, would be most likely trying to create a destructive pattern out of the demonstrations this day, in which case the police and all the police state type of things would come out. And that's the typical government response around the world. So in a way, they both feed on each other. But sometimes things don't happen to change the larger pattern of the world without some sort of revolution or re-evolution. And a lot of people think of that as being the way that things change, because typically that's been the process. But there's another process. That process is to allow more divine cause here, to allow divine cause to move through mankind. And this is easier said than done, because if it was easy, the churches and the temples and the religions of the world would have already done it. But we can see that divine cause doesn't come into the world easily through those structures. It's the structures in themselves turn out to be part of the problem. So divine cause has to come through without structure, without an organization in that way. It has to come through individuals who allow divine cause to work through in their lives individually. And then it spreads into a larger pattern. If we think of trying to have a revolution on earth to change things, well, the other side would balance it out. The police state would balance it out and try to use force to stop that. They'd be charged with that. And of course there'd be arrests and all the demonstrations and perhaps bloodshed and things. And certainly these are things that are in some way indicative of what's going on. But that's not fully how divine cause works on earth. It works through a vibrational realm. It works through allowing a new vibration to come in. This is why it's important to have those who can allow the new vibration to move through their own forms. Reorganizing the cells, reorganizing the mind, reorganizing the feelings. We're given a certain job to do, and that job is to let our forms, our mind, our heart, transmute into something that's more workable for divine action here on earth. And then that field of action goes out into the world. And the world doesn't necessarily have to go through a big revolutionary cataclysmic event with the police state, etc. But those are things that indicate that divine causes is increasing. As we see these things, they're just evidence of the fact that when the revolutions are starting and when they're happening, that there's a change coming on earth. When the police states are there and coming to the forefront, there's a change coming on earth. Because the police states are there to try to control people from moving into a higher realm, a different place of function. We're charged with being aware of those things, but not necessarily as the main place where we can put our conscious energy into doing that ourselves. We hold that in resolution in our form. We hold an awareness of the things that need to change for the betterment of society, for the betterment of people, for the betterment of life on earth. But the most effective thing we can do as a group, as a collective, and individually speaking, is to allow God to be here, is to allow the Creator to work through, to allow the God being that is indwelling in each one to come forth more. Then there are God beings in action on earth. There's your God being, the truth of who you are. When the truth of enough God beings are in action on earth, then something else can happen. A change, but a relatively peaceful transmutation of consciousness. Above the surface of consciousness and all the trouble is what we see around of a seeming society. But below the surface is the subconscious nature of mankind, individually, ancestral-wise, family-wise, and on the world pattern. The subconscious has had a lot of turmoil in it. There's nothing we can do in the physical dimension until we gain, as individuals, some ground on the subconscious dimension. This is where the feelings come up, the first flush of feelings. When something happens, if we master the thing that happens so our feelings don't go out of control, then there's an opportunity for the subconscious in our own forms, because the subconscious works through all our physical forms. Then that control over the subconscious allows for a clear movement of divine substance, divine consciousness, through from the subconscious into the conscious mind, into the conscious heart, and into the world. It can then go into the larger subconscious. But the subconscious is the critical thing that has to be changed, that has to be addressed. In the Bible it speaks of those who stand on the sea of glass, mingled with fire. But people don't understand what that is. For the most part they think of it, well, it's a sea of glass mingled with fire. 2,000 years or 3,000 years, however long they've been speaking of a sea of glass mingled in fire, there's not very much understanding that the sea is the sea of the subconscious. And the mingling in fire is mingled with the Shekinah, the fire of God's action, the fire of God's love. This has to transmute and occur. If it was easy to do, all the chairs in here would be filled. We'd have a lot more people connecting online. But remember, what this brings up is the subconscious stuff that goes on in the individual. It goes on in you. It goes on in others. When they come along, the first thing that starts to be felt is something coming up for them. People don't know what that something is, but it feels uncomfortable because there's something coming from the subconscious. And because it's coming through the subconscious and it hasn't been a sea of glass, it's been a sea of turmoil with all sorts of things in the subconscious. Fear and shame and guilt and envy and resentments and all sorts of subconscious patterns. That's the first thing that comes up. When the point of consciousness starts to push up from the subconscious, there's an initial feeling that somehow what's coming up is bad or is uncomfortable, because that uncomfortable sensation within the subconscious can do things within, can do things in the heart. It can bring up thoughts, it can bring up feelings, and it's uncomfortable. Great, because without that uncomfortable nature of the subconscious coming up, there is no opportunity for the individual to gain mastery over the subconscious, to stand on the sea of glass mingled in fire. The fire is coming. It's coming up from below the consciousness. It's coming from the subconsciousness. So you don't have to do anything about the fire. The fire is already coming. Fire is coming into the whole collective subconscious of mankind. Individually, you're only meant, each one is meant to gain mastery over those things that come up in the subconscious. When you feel the uncomfortable nature of the subconscious things that come up, that's the time to hold steady, because that'll clear something in you. The subconscious in your body and mind and heart is all-inclusive part of the sea of glass. A sea of glass implies that it's still, it's glass, it's clear as crystal. So it's steady, it's nothing ripples, there are no distorted patterns in a sea of glass. So if you still feel the sea of glass with some distorted patterns, great. If you're feeling the heat, if you're feeling subconscious stuff coming up in you, good for you. This is the best thing that you can possibly experience, because at some point that you'll have the mastery to be able to stand in the subconscious realm on the sea of glass of your own subconscious and let the fire come through. Let the mingling of the fire of the Creator come through you. Then you're of some value to the creative field, to the Creator. It's wonderful that each of you here, those of you that listen to this and are conscious of what needs to happen, are at least participating. That's 9/10 of what needs to happen. The fact that you bring yourself to this place of awareness. But there's nothing to join. There's no organization, there's no religion, there's nothing to give your money to, there's nothing political happening here. This isn't about any of that stuff. This is only about letting your subconscious mind, your subconscious heart, the feeling realm, to come under divine control. Not my divine control, your divine control. So that you become the means whereby your God being, the divine you, comes forth. Then there's some action on earth, God in action on earth through you, through the human side of you. This is the only job that we have next. The individual transmutation of the subconscious realm. Standing in all the moments, because it's not the big things we have to attend to. We've discussed this before. We're given a kingdom of little things. It's the very small things, the finer and finer things that you feel. The first flush of the finest feelings, or the not so comfortable feelings. Typically, those who stand on the sea of glass, well, the fire is coming from below, so it's going to come through the sea of glass into the world. So as a person standing on the sea of glass, you're going to bring up for things for other people, the same way as I bring up things for other people. We each bring up things for other people because we stand in the holy place of the sea of glass mingled in fire. Fire comes out, other people feel uncomfortable. It's no doubt about it. It's not meant, we're not doing a comfortable type of thing here.